Madam President. And thank you to my colleagues. It's been a long road, but I was thinking about this bill, which is called, of course, the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, but much more than an acronym. It is the Transgender Human Rights Law for the state of New York. And I was thinking about it in terms of my daughter. And last summer, my daughter and I were at a swimming pool with some other LGBTQ families. And we were paddling along in the ice-cold water. And this little girl swam up to Sylvia, my 7-year-old. And she said, "Who's that?" And Sylvia said, "That's my daddy." And without missing a beat, the other little girl said, "Well, then where's your other daddy?" And to me, that's an example of the quantum leap forward that we've taken as a chamber, thanks to the support of so many colleagues, and we've taken as a society, thanks to popular culture and leadership in this Capitol, including our governor and our president and our Supreme Court. But there was and remains unfinished business in the civil rights movement, in particular the LGBTQ civil rights movement, for the reason that the last 17 years in our human rights law, transgender people have been expressly excluded. That wasn't by accident. Back in 2002, when the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act was passed in this very chamber, there was a motion made by my esteemed predecessor, Senator Tom Duane, to include transgender and gender nonconforming people in that bill. But they were jettisoned. They were left on a desert island in the world of human rights, and we told them, "We'll be back to get you. Our lifeboat will be coming back. Don't worry." Well, it's taken 17 years. So to them, that speck on the horizon is not a mirage. It is the state Senate finally coming back to pick you up and bring you into civil society with all the rights and protections that New Yorkers deserve. And I've been asked, why is this necessary? Well, here are the facts. Under New York state law, if you are transgender or gender nonconforming, according to the statute, you can be fired from your place of employment. You can be denied a lease for your apartment. You can be kicked out of a restaurant just because you are transgender or gender nonconforming. In addition to that, while some of that has been covered by executive order, not with the force of law and always subject to change, the one thing that has not been addressed is protections for transgender and gender nonconforming people under our state hate crimes law. And it's not lost on me or transgender activists, many of whom are here in the galleries, that transgender people are the #1 target of hate violence in these United States of America. We have to do something to protect them. And the symbolism of us passing our transgender human rights law is profound. It's profound at every level of our society, among the very young and among the very old. Let me just share with you some results of the United States Transgender Survey. It found that 30% of transgender and gender nonconforming people have been fired from their jobs because of their gender identity. 30%. 23% of those folks have been denied housing. 31% have been denied service in a place of public accommodation. And yes, that great American bathroom debate, which I'm glad we're not having today, 59% had avoided using public restrooms out of fear of being confronted. That's the reality for transgender and gender nonconforming people in our society today. And I took the liberty of soliciting some thoughts from some of our transgender New Yorkers about how they felt about this historic day here in Albany. And a woman named Kristen Browdy, she was recently elected as the board president of the LGBT Bar Association in New York, wrote to me. She said, "Your legislation means everything. Quote, we can now be assured that in public accommodation, in business, and in every aspect of life, we'll be on the same footing as everyone else. That no longer we'll have to fear professional or personal repercussions when we come out or when our gender is revealed, and we will help erase some of the fear that every transgender person has about coming out. That fear," Kristen writes, "has led me not to come out publicly until I reached the age of 65. GENDA," she says, "will go a long way toward ending the fear of legalized discrimination, a fear that so many in this state rightly, though unfortunately, have lived with. A fear, I have to add, colleagues, is compounded by decisions being made in Washington, D.C. to undermine the civil liberties that were put forward through executive order by President Obama and now are being decimated by President Trump." Then there's Wendy Marie from Buffalo, who writes in to say, "I've been refused medical appointments due to being trans. I've been turned down for employment and told outright that if I dress as a male, then there is an open position. I have been refused lodging and entrance to food establishments and openly ridiculed in public. Passing GENDA would show that our elected state representatives will no longer tolerate discrimination against any citizens, regardless of their gender expression." And finally, there's a constituent of mine named Sam, a young boy in my district who's 14 and lives in the East Village. I called his mom. She was so proud.
Take your time.
All of these New Yorkers have been waiting so long. They've been waiting too long. But we're going to fix that today. So I just want to thank my colleagues who have pushed this issue forward. So many of us have our own experiences with the LGBT community. Senator Duane, who's the first openly LGBT member of this body. Senator Squadron, a straight ally, but a good guy nonetheless, who carried this bill for so many years. Senators Skoufis and Stavisky, who moved these bills quickly through committee. My colleagues in the LGBT caucus, Deborah Glick, Danny O'Donnell, Harry Bronson, Dick Godfried, who's not a caucus member but is carrying GENDA in the other house, and former Assembly Member Matthew Titone, and Senator Kruger, whose brother lived during the plague years. Senator Savino, who gave that killer speech on marriage equality. Senator Ramos, who understands that transgender women of color are now a political voting bloc, and we should be listening to them. Senator Benjamin, who said the other day, wow, we're dealing with democracy and human rights in the first 2 days of our legislative session. Can it get any more real than that? and Senator Gianaris for pushing forward not just GENDA, but being the original co-prime sponsor, and in fact, the originator of the bill to ban conversion therapy. And finally, our leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. It's no coincidence that we're addressing this issue in the first week of our legislating, because Andrea Stewart-Cousins wrote the human rights law in Westchester County. She knows what it's like to be discriminated against. She knows the value of standing up for our fellow citizens, no matter what they look like, no matter what their gender identity or expression is, no matter who they love. So to my colleagues, thank you. Let us move forward. Let us all rise up and support civil liberties for everyone. Thank you.